Assalamu alaikum everyone. Jumaa Mubarak. Inshallah, today we will be continuing with the 24th word, and right now we are on the 5th branch, and last week we discussed the third fruit. So today we'll be reading and inshallah discussing the fourth fruit. Before I begin, if anyone wants to provide a short overview or summary or whatever they remember from the previous weeks, I would welcome them to do so. But if not, I can share a few takeaways I have. So just as a excuse me, just as a reminder, in the first fruit, the text talked about how to orient one's feelings of love and fear towards the correct source and how to utilize them correctly. The second fruit talked about worship and its significance. And the third fruit was about following the rulings of the Sharia, and we talked about what that meant and how fundamentally we are in search of meaning, right? We would like to transform our habitual actions into meaningful ones. We'd like to be aware of the reality of things in our day-to-day lives. And all throughout all of these various fruits that we've been talking about, there has been an emphasis on the Prophet, peace be upon him. In the first fruit, it ended with the verse of, if you love God, follow me, and God will love you. And then last week, it also provided the answer of following the path of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as a means to bring that meaningfulness into one's life. So there is this emphasis on the practices of the Prophet, following the path of the Prophet throughout this fifth branch, and how that is a essential pillar in living a life that aligns with our expectations and our needs. So inshallah, today we'll start reading the fourth fruit, and it's not too long. It's about 3 paragraphs. So I will read it, and then we can discuss it, inshallah. I read it a bit earlier today, and I have to be honest, all I have are kind of questions. So inshallah, all of you can help me better understand it, and we can try to understand it all together. So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. O soul, do not look at the worldly, and especially the dissipated and the unbelievers, and be deceived by their superficial glitter and illicit pleasures. Do not imitate them. For even if you do imitate them, you will not be like them. You will decline immeasurably. You cannot be an animal even. For the intellect in your head becomes an inauspicious tool which constantly beats you over the head. For example, there's a palace, and in one of its large apartments is a powerful electric lamp. Small electric lights which branch out from it and are attached to it have been divided among its small apartments. Now someone touches the switch of the big light and turns it off. All the apartments are plunged into deep darkness and desolation. Another palace has small electric lights in all its apartments, which are not connected to the large light. If the owner of the latter palace presses the switch of the large electric light and turns it off, there may still be lights on in the other apartments by which he can carry out his work, and which will not allow thieves to profit from the darkness. O soul, the first palace is a Muslim, and the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is the large electric light in his heart. If the Muslim forgets him, or I seek refuge with God from Satan the accursed, he expels him from his heart, he will accept none of the other prophets. Indeed, no place will remain in his spirit for any perfection. He will not even recognize his sustainer. All the apartments and subtle faculties in his nature will be plunged into darkness, and there will be a terrible destruction and desolation in his heart. How will he profit in the face of this destruction and desolation? Where will he find familiarity? What benefit will he secure which will repair damage? However, Europeans resemble the second palace. Even if they cast out from their hearts the light of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, lights of a sort may remain, or they suppose they remain. They may continue to have a sort of belief in their Creator and in Moses and Jesus, peace be upon them, which will allow them to attain good morals and character. O my evil commanding soul, if you say, I am not a European and I want to be an animal, how many times have I told you, you cannot be an animal? For there is intelligence in your head, and it strikes your face, eyes, and head with the pains of the past and fears of the future, and beats you. It adds 1,000 pains to one pleasure. Whereas animals receive pleasure without pain. So first pluck out your intelligence and throw it away, then be an animal. You will also receive the chastening slap of, this is a Quranic ayah from chapter 7, verse 179, like cattle, nay, they are further astray. And that is the end of the fourth fruit of the fifth branch of the 24th word. So again, I think it is useful to look at this in conjunction with the other fruits that we have discussed so far. These other fruits of this fifth branch, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, also had this emphasis on following the path of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And whether this is in terms of how to direct one's human feelings like love and fear, or how one is to attain meaning into one's life, into one's daily actions, or even, the concept of worship, all of these are intrinsically tied to following the path of the Prophet. At least the author is constantly drawing attention to this fact. In just the last fruit, as we discussed last week, it said, so believe in God and his messenger, the unlettered prophet who believes in God and his word, follow him that you may be guided. And now, this fourth fruit, it's interesting to me. There is this very, again, large emphasis on how the Prophet and Prophet Muhammad specifically, peace be upon him, is critical to knowing God in a sense, and being in a relationship with God as well. There are some questions that I have, but let me pause right here. If anyone wants to say anything, they're free and welcome to comment. Or if they have any clarifying questions, they're welcome to ask those as well. You can interrupt me, as we say each week, any moment. Okay, so I'm just, I'll go line by line in this fourth fruit, and we'll see what we can, the parts that we can make sense of, the parts that might be a bit more confusing. Again, I would say I'm more confused than fulfilled or satisfied, so please feel free to help me out. So again, this fourth fruit, just as a general theme, he's addressing his soul, right? Oh soul. So it's an inward addressal. The recipient must be my own soul as well. If I take this to mean anything for me, if I take this text to be practical in my own life, it says, "Do not look at the worldly, and especially the dissipated and the unbelievers, and be deceived by their superficial glitter and illicit pleasures." And some questions that came to mind for me is, who are the worldly? What does it mean to be worldly? What is the superficial glitter? I mean, is superficial glitter the apparent ease or happiness that I may notice other people? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I feel pretty worldly. I live in the world. I pursue things within the world. Trying to get an education, a job within the world. So how do we understand who the worldly are? And I think it's important to understand what exactly the worldliness of any subject signifies, because here he's saying that if you try to be that sort of person, and this doesn't have to be, I don't think this has to be directed to Europeans or otherwise. It's a characterization of a specific approach or mindset or worldview that one may have. If you try to be like them, it says you will not be like them. You will decline immeasurably. So then I ask myself as well, am I trying to imitate anyone? Am I trying to imitate am I trying to attain a certain worldview? Let me continue a little bit before I tie in together some other inquiries I have. You cannot be an animal even, and here he's saying that, and as he also emphasizes in the concluding remarks of this fruit, that even an animal, I can't put myself in the position of an animal, because whether I like it or not, I have the ability to think and reflect, and my intellect will not leave me alone in terms of it. I won't be able to enjoy myself. And here now he's giving this analogy of two palaces, right? So one palace has like this central system where one powerful electric lamp is connected to all the other lamps amongst that apartment complex. And if you shut down that main switch, I guess, that main central energy source, everything else plunges into darkness. They're all interconnected. There's a sense of interconnectedness there. Whereas in the other palace, there are a multitude of different lights, and they are not interconnected. If you turn off one, the other is not affected per se. So he's giving us these two examples to say that one of them exemplifies a Muslim, and the other one exemplifies, I suppose, a non-Muslim. And he's saying that the central electric light for a Muslim is the Prophet Muhammad, and that if one kind of does not care about him or expels him from his heart, then not only will that person not be able to see any other prophets, they will also not be able to recognize their sustainer or excel in terms of their spirit in any sense. It's just utter darkness. And so I guess this is like the primary question: why is this so? And why is it that my starting point is quote unquote being Muslim? Um, it seems like the author here is using Muslim as a sort of marker of identification or identity. And it's confusing for me because this fruit it starts by being addressed to my soul, but then it also seems to take for granted that I come from a certain position of belief. Um, and and yeah, I'm ultimately just confused on why is it that uh that he's making this analogy. Um, how am I to understand the significance of the prophet, peace be upon him, being the large electric light? Is it that if a person, if I um, so let me pause right here. Sohail is saying, what is the distinction between being a Muslim, between being a European versus a Muslim? Um, so I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Sohail, I don't think that distinction is made super clear to me. It's just saying that for a Muslim, at least gives the example of the two palaces, and that for a Muslim, the Prophet Muhammad is this sort of central um, focal point of light in one's heart. And if that source is cut off, then all the other lights, all the other potentialities to advance and become more perfect are extinguished. Whereas for the European or the foreigner, I think, or just like the non-Muslim perhaps, um, they don't necessarily have to accept the Prophet in order to, I guess, see light or have light in various other ways. So that's a rough explanation, but let me pause here to give brother Yusuf a microphone.
Jazakallah khair. So I'm trying to locate this fourth fruit within the text because it looks like he is becoming very practical in this one, in the fourth fruit, more so than any of the previous fruits or branches. So in the first branch, he established names of Creator being manifest everywhere. In the second branch, he talked about a separation or distinction between path of philosophy, just to summarize in a nutshell, among many other things, between path of philosophy and path of prophethood. And in the third branch, he talked about how to benefit from path of prophethood. And in this regard, he was talking about how to evaluate narrations as this is being like unique thing that comes with the messenger other than the revelation itself. Then in the fourth one, he started talking about worship. And now in the fifth one, like in the fourth one, he was talking about the worship of everything in this existence, everything worshiping the creator. Now in the fifth branch, he is talking about the worship of the human. So if we follow the arc, it looks like prophets, it all boils down to worshiping, because it started with manifestations of the creator, and now we ended up with the worshiping the creator. So it started from outside, the arc ended up in human, in me. What is my response to the creator? And in the first fruit, he was talking about what does it mean for human to worship. So he talked about fear and love and how to respond or how to make use of these two feelings properly so that human is going to be human but not suffer. In the second fruit, then, so at the end of first one, he almost equated worshiping as showing my response, my appreciation, my love towards my creator. In the second fruit, he now started talking about worship is not for you to gain something more as a response, but rather you already received things, you are responding back for them. So this is a common question that could come to my mind. What is my worship? So in the second fruit, as if he is providing an answer to this potential question. And then there was, since that he is explaining this as such, a question comes, well, this is something too much, my very little worship, how am I going to respond back to the spring season, the sun rising every morning? So like the amount of things that I receive, bounties, is so large, I cannot respond back to that. So as if there was a question that comes to me that would take me away from worshiping, because I cannot pay this back anyways. I can never respond, so I better never start it. But then the author explained this is not the case. And he was using the terminology of like a, uh, some word like a universal intention. We discussed what it might have meaning. Then when we come to the third fruit, uh, he further said worshiping is not only your worship when you are doing the prayer or when you open your hands and ask from your creator. Actually, you can make every single moment of your life as a worship, and this would happen by following the messenger in every aspect of life, but with the point of what your point of view being, messenger is the messenger of the creator. He is the beloved of the creator, which means the creator wants me to think like this, act like this, behave like this, so on and so forth. So I would like to align myself with this reference point. But now when we come to the fourth fruit, what is the author doing here now? So as if now he is saying, so far since the very beginning, he was building up a like in a structure. But if I am thinking that, well, but still I have an inclination, I already have somewhat of a building that was made up before, and I have an inclination to imitate others, not the messenger. Because in the third fruit, he was mentioning to follow the messenger. And now in the fourth, he's saying maybe you have a tendency to uh, imitate somebody else, not the messenger. You are human. And actually, he's observing this is also the case. I have a tendency to look quite cool, like, I don't know, Keanu Reeves. Like, he's a handsome guy, he's like very cool. So, and he is the popular guy nowadays. I mean, it's not like, uh, I guess, since Hollywood is the most popular thing, so the popular people are in that domain nowadays, in that part of the world. And since it's being advertised so much and it's very like with glittering lights, I feel like I have an inclination. I want to become like them or like that person. Then the author says, yes, I know, I feel you, I hear you, but because the other alternative was I was already such a person, then this fourth fruit would not be that much of a problem for me. Because if I'm like a foreigner, quote unquote foreigner, we can talk about this why he's using as Suhail was asking that question. But uh, if I am in this position, I'm asking that question to myself: do I have this attitude to be like a Westerner or a like foreigner to matters of belief after those four branches plus three fruits? Meaning that I already went through all of these. I started appreciating the worship, the messenger, and my love, my worship being like a response to what I am receiving in the creation. I went through this journey, but still, I am having this tendency to uh, imitate the glittering lights of modern life. I want to enjoy my day still. So, how do I respond to that? Because he responded my fear and my love as my two basic needs that needs to be fulfilled. But how about my tendency to look cool, to enjoy my moments like people out there are doing apparently? So after going this many stages, is it not possible for me? So this is why I think the when he says a Muslim versus a Westerner or a foreigner, when he makes this sort of a comparison, my feeling is to the extent that you came to fourth fruit without making any objection, well, this simply doesn't make sense. He is as if saying that coming to that point means you already have something. It's not an assumption anymore, but you are already somewhere. So as a person at this level, still you might have such a tendency, but what would that tendency mean? And how can we address such a tendency? This is how I understand from the use of Muslims in here, rather than he is assuming that me, the reader, is coming from a Muslim background and he might have such tendencies, so on and so forth.
Hi, sorry. Okay, I was finding having difficulty finding the unmute button. Um, Atik, you can go ahead, please.
So what I understood from this is that Muslims and for generally non-Muslims come from two different moral frameworks, where the Muslim moral framework is very deeply rooted in the existence and example of the Prophet, whereas the non-Muslim moral framework is rooted in other things and um, perhaps still rooted in other prophets like Jesus or Moses. And so for the non-Muslims, however they behave in public or whatever their behaviors is is still consistent with their moral framework based on whatever societal developments have happened. There's still some form of morality involved in there, and so for a Muslim to imitate them would be to ignore his and reject his own moral framework because for whatever reason the non-Muslims behaviors and actions is contrary or can be contrary to the teachings of the Prophet, for example. And so the issue I see um, is that the non-Muslims are doing things out of ignorance, right? They don't have the wisdoms or the teachings of the Prophet to dictate their morals, but the Muslim knowing of these, let's say prohibitions or examples of the Prophet, and knowing that they are in contradiction to the way that these non-Muslims are behaving, for them to imitate, right, these non-Muslims is rejecting the Prophet's example, and so that is worse than these non-Muslims doing things out of ignorance.
Thank you, Atik, for that. That was an interesting point. Um, I think just along the lines of, well, before I speak, Suhail, you had a comment. Would you like to read it and maybe explain it further?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm not sure. Um, uh, yeah, so this is just my um, understanding of the text. I'm not quite sure this is what he was getting at, but in the fourth fruit. But what I take from it is that the prophetic message is universal. So rather than looking at the worldly aspect of things, so to speak, I guess the dunyawi aspect of things, the prophetic message sort of makes clear what the universe means, what it's intended for, what its purpose is, and the universe includes the self. So if you sort of cut off that connection to his message after you are aware of it, you really can't. It's as if, you know, once you become aware of that truth, like you can't ever forget it. I mean, you can sort of numb yourself, but as he says, your intellect keeps constantly beating you over the head uh, because you know, like at that point, you know the truth. I know Yusuf brought up Keanu Reeves, but like, I mean, it's I have a feeling because of the Matrix. So once you sort of know what it is, you can't really go back. It's impossible. Whereas these other sort of prophetic messages, which he identifies, let's say, as Moses and Jesus, while they may have spoke of a universal message like Muhammad, or it's not clear from what's left of it. Hence the individual nature of it, because you're not looking at the universe, or not looking at it as clearly, or it's not as obvious to the one who subscribes to that thinking. Hence, while you can maybe not acknowledge the Muhammadan message or the Quranic message, it doesn't necessarily damage you to the same degree, because what you know is very particular. It's very individual. So it's as if, you know, I mean, it's like, I mean, I think everyone sort of hears this, you know, faith is personal, it's my relationship, and there's a dichotomy between what I'm doing in the world, what I'm experiencing. He gives the example, I guess, of shopping or purchasing, or that's out there in the world. That's distinct from what I believe in that worldview. So there's no universality in that. Hence why, if that, in his example, that big light is turned off, it doesn't particularly hurt the person, because for that person, in a sense, that light is already sort of turned off for them, in that they're not aware of it. So effectively, it is sort of turned off for them. Hence why it doesn't hurt them. But once you know, you can't go back. It's impossible. I guess once you become aware of it, you become conscious of that truth, that universal truth, universal message. You know, it's either you plunge yourself and thus the universe into darkness, or you leave the light on to illuminate everything. So that's what I took away from this fourth fruit, which kind of ties into the third fruit as well.
Thank you, Sohail, for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, all of this is helpful for me, because I've seen Nursey talk about this before, about how even if it's not especially linked to the prophet, that, you know, like a Muslim who may leave Islam becomes poisonous rather than someone who was never Muslim to begin with. And this has always kind of confused me, but at least from here, what I'm the point that I'm taking away, at least presently, and I'm trying to think further upon it, is that in all of my actions, in all of my interactions, in all of the interpretations that I do and have throughout my just normal day, I am always basing them off some sort of reference point. And so the question is, what will that source of reference be? In the clothes I wear, my source of reference may be, things that I observe in the media, perhaps. In the writings that I write and books that I read, my source of reference might be certain standards of what is good to know and what is necessary to know. I operate throughout my life with a source of reference to everything that I do. And I guess the question is, imitating others in this respect means accepting a source of reference other than the Prophet, other than a source that looks to the meaningfulness in things, and a source of reference that is something other than creator-centric, if you will. So, and I'm trying to think further about this, of what it means that once I am familiar with the source of reference that is the Prophet, what it means to depart that, and how that impacts everything else that I do, everything else that I experience or feel within myself. And in the following, in the second paragraph, he says that, this part especially had kind of intrigued me. It says that if I forget or expel the Prophet from my heart, then there's no place to remain in my spirit for any perfection, and I will not even recognize my sustainer. So, this all I guess it feels a little bit dramatic, and I'm not fully, I understand that I need to have a source of reference, and I have a choice as to what that source of reference will be, but I am not completely digesting the catastrophic implications that are being spelled out here. Brother Yusuf, please go ahead.
So when the author says, taking the Prophet out of my heart, what does he mean by that? Is it like being ignorant to the messenger, or rejecting the messenger? So which one is he talking about in here? Or is there a difference between the two? Like being ignorant to the messenger, or saying that, I guess the second one is clear. If I say that the messenger, I'm rejecting the messenger, let's say. If I say so, then clearly the message collapses, everything collapses, right? Because if he was a liar, then whatever he says also becomes a lie. So everything collapses. I guess this part of it is quite clear. Then I need to build up a worldview of my own. And I guess when this happens, only if I will be able to borrow anything that supposedly a liar brought to me. So this part makes slightly more clear. But if I'm being ignorant to the messenger, so is it still being like what he is describing in here? I'm just thinking loudly, but how do I practically ignore or turn my back or take the messenger out of my heart? How does this happen?
Thank you, Brother Yusuf, for that question. And before I let Sohail talk, I mean, it's also, I guess, for me, the question is, what does it mean to have the Prophet in my heart to begin with? Such that I understand what it means for him to depart from it. Brother Sohail, please.
Yeah, what you brought up, I think that's, and what you brought up, that's important, to expel from his heart. So to me, in a sense, I think she's talking theoretically here, in that if one is really aware of the prophetic message, such that it becomes internalized and that you are accepting of it, that's like what I guess it means to take its place in the heart. It essentially belief, not like, oh, somebody said, some prophet said this, Muhammad said this, and it sounds right, and I guess I'll go along with it. But I think, at least because Nursi talks in a very, when he's giving these examples in sort of the theoretical black and white sense, if you believe in his messengership, and therefore what that means, his universal message, and you're accepting of it and you confirm it and you can't deny it, and it's consistent with who you are as a human being, hence why I think it means to take its place in the heart. But then you sort of, for one reason or another, you wish to deny it because you don't, you think it's burdensome. You could think it carries too many responsibilities and too many restrictions. And what you know now, it's too much for you to bear, so to speak. How can you believe really after that? To your question about, it sounds so dramatic, but it's as if you're seeing the sun and then deny its existence. How can you accept any other source of light, whether it's Moses or Jesus, because you know in your heart of hearts that their message is essentially the same. So how can you accept anyone then? It's impossible. Whereas somebody who doesn't know that and simply is just following Moses or Jesus or what they perceive to be their teachings from what's left of them, doesn't see them as a sort of, doesn't see their messages as an all-encompassing sun, all-encompassing light. It's very particular. Let alone there even being a sun, so to speak, in that sort of paradigm. It's as if in that light example, everybody is their own sun. Hence the individualism. There's no universality. That's why it's not as practically speaking, it's not as difficult to bear when you think about it. And this is not meant as like some sort of criticism of Christianity or Judaism because they're inferior to Islam, but just looking at the belief system, if you can really speak of it in the same way, it doesn't challenge the ego in the way that the prophetic or the Quranic message does. It doesn't challenge the intellect, and it doesn't. And by not challenging the intellect to the way it does, that the Quranic message does, the intellect is not beating over your head like the way the Quran does. Because the Quran, by looking at the universe, by asking you to look at the meaningful aspect of all things, including your day-to-day life activities, including about how you think and how you reason and how you feel, you realize the Quranic message is not a particular application in your life. It's not just when you go to the masjid, or you celebrate some holiday, or you fast, but pertains to every aspect of your life, how you see the world. Then it may appear burdensome or very heavy, that at that point, if you deny, you essentially deny reality. So it's, in that theoretical sense, it does sound dramatic, but if you think about it, I think it sounds reasonable. So, but again, I would not, for me personally, I look at these examples as theoretical rather than actual necessarily, because no one can actually know. It's very difficult. I wouldn't say no. It's very difficult to know, if not almost impossible, how somebody's, like, what their progression is, from accepting it or being confirmatory of the truth and then outright denying it. I mean, people say a lot of things, but you don't know what the progression was necessarily. So, but if they did follow this, then I think he's right. You can't, um, uh, for you, then it becomes more about discrediting the prophetic message than about finding some other truth, because you realize there is no other truth. It's not, oh, I'm going to become Christian. It's about discrediting the prophetic message. And you see that kind of play out in life if you pay attention to these characters that the media sort of props up and encourages. That's what happens.
Thank you, Sohail. That was really helpful for me. And I guess just touching back to that analogy you gave of, if someone experiences the sun, how can they not just I guess what's important then there is to first have had experience of the sun to begin with. So I guess in this sense, in this context rather, one must first actually have the prophet, peace be upon him, centralized in his heart as a serious referential source for meaning and action and understanding. Brother Yusuf, does that help your question, or would you like to say anything in response to that?
No, I'm just still trying to understand, like asking myself, do I, in my heart, do I forget the messenger, and what sort of a darkness do I face if I do so? Or do I have a tendency to expel the messenger from my heart? If I'm not feeling this in myself, do I see such tendency in people who are exposed to the light that the messenger brought in? And now there's a tendency to either forget or to expel. Expel is quite strong in here, but then what is the outcome? Because still, yeah, I agree that the metaphor that is being given in here is theoretical, but I feel like this fourth fruit is quite practical. What I mean by practical is like the third fruit and like all these fruits are quite tangible things in terms of worship or loving the creator and being loved by the creator. Because if it simply stays as theoretical, like proving existence of God I can take it as like some of the proofs at least. 2 plus 2 equals 4. But when it comes to worship, I feel like it is more something about how I experience, how I feel, how I live, how I sense. So this is why I take it as more practical. And in this fourth fruit, I feel like the author is like taking this, putting me to the surgery table, as if. And I'm trying to still see. Uh, Whenever I forget the messenger, do I experience such stuff? Or am I supposed to, or I don't know, what is the author talking about in here? So yeah, I mean, if anybody has anything about this, I will appreciate to hear.
Thank you. So we can have Atik and then Abdurrahman speak, inshallah.
I'd like to elaborate on the difference between um, expelling the prophet from your heart and maybe ignoring the prophet in your day-to-day life. And so where ignoring the prophet would be knowing his teachings and ignoring it. And so if you did that, you would know that you were doing something wrong, and you would feel that guilt or shame of knowing that you were, going in and disagreeing with what the prophet was doing. But expelling the prophet would be totally like ignoring that he has any right to make the claim that he does, completely disagreeing with the validity of his teaching. And so maybe a practical example is like eating pork, let's say. That in one example you might say, oh, that it's wrong, right? It's forbidden by God, and you accept that it's wrong, but you do it just to maybe try it out and see what the hype is about or whatever. You just like the taste of pork, and in that case, you'd feel shame or guilt in disobeying, and you're wrong, but you still accept the teaching. And in another case, you might say, well, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with his teaching of pork being bad. I mean, you can cook it at a certain temperature and kill the bacteria, or just convince yourself that he's wrong. And then so the issue with doing something like that, even for something as mundane as eating pork, something maybe not as central to worship, what happens is that that gives you permission to doubt any other thing that the prophet has said. You ignore his prophetic authority, that you doubt his prophetic authority, and that kind of allows you to do whatever you want. I feel like this is the beginning. Doubting even a single teaching is the beginning of leading yourself to nihilism, where you can just pick and choose whatever you want, and that is no good.
Thank you, Abdurrahman, and then Suhail can go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I don't know if this will be an answer for Brother Yusuf, and I probably won't be, but just I'm thinking about the progression of things, as Brother Yusuf mentioned. Like, this is the fourth fruit, and it's interesting that
Abdurrahman, can you talk louder, please?
into this topic. In the first fruit, second fruit, third fruit, we were talking about love, how we need to give our love to God, and then in the second fruit, we were talking about worship, and then we talked about the Sharia and the Sunnah, and then now it seems like now Nursi is talking to himself. It's like, be careful. You can't take the path of. Is this better? Be careful. You can't take the path of, let's say, the non-believers. You can't turn around right now and say, I'm not sure I like this, or you know what, I disagree. Let me now dive into living life just for living life. You might wonder, why can't you do that? And like I asked that to myself, and I'm thinking like, why do you even have this question, or why do you even have to warn yourself about this? And I guess, like, why do you even seek out a prophet in the first place? You know, why? Because like in the first fruit, we're talking about how if you don't give your love to the creator, then you become in despair, you fall into ruin. And the second one, we talked again about how, like, you know, you need to have be grateful, and that there's like this bounty, and you need to appreciate it. And then the third one, we're talking about how there's a path of the prophet that has light within it that guides you, and it's like there's like you know, it's the correct path for you, and you can experience that. So like here, you're seeking a path that'll take you somewhere what better, somewhere good. And then why are you having doubts right now in the fourth fruit? I think this is like a very human, as Brother Yusuf was saying, this is very practical, because you do have doubts, or at least, let's say, not doubts, but you sometimes think, you know, uh this may be very hard, it may be hard to live with belief, or it may be hard to uh, believe, because you know some things are difficult. You might go through hardships in life, and you might be like, wait, is this truly wisdom? Is this truly from a wise one, or is this truly from a merciful one? And you start having doubts, and you're just like, okay, maybe it's not satisfying you, so like, okay, maybe I need to dive into just living my life in joy and pleasure. You know, the temporary joy might be my escape. You might have start having some doubts. So I think this is a very practical reminder, saying, you know, at this point, if you deny the messenger, you know, you're not going to be like those other people, because for you would be denying all the meaning. You know, maybe these other people, they're not denying all meaning, they're just trying to find enjoyment in some sense, or they're trying to find what path they can. But for you, you will be actively, I think this is like, you will be actively denying that there is any meaning, and then trying to dive head first into this idea of living temporary, for the temporary pleasures, like putting these blinds up and not trying to see anything else, because you know the path, it was just, let's say, it didn't make sense to you, or you didn't enjoy it. So like, you're like, and then you just come to the conclusion, okay, there is or you try to convince yourself there is no creator, there is no merciful one, and then you just try to live in your own path with your own ego. So I mean, I just want to say, yeah, I see, like, in myself to some degree, I can confirm that, you know, we have a tendency to want to sometimes, like, you know, maybe they have it better. You know, I see these people around me, they seem very happy, you know, they seem like they're enjoying their life, and I'm like, maybe I'm like thinking, you know, how do they do that? Can I be one of them? Can I also do that? And you know, obviously I don't know what they live in their personal lives, but I also know that, like, to go follow that path, I would have to deny so much that I already have seen and I've confirmed. And everything I denied would be, you know, I would have to close my eyes to the truth. Like, you know, you can't negate the truth, you can maybe just avoid looking at it. So it would be just like living in this, like, turmoil within yourself constantly. And I don't think it would be anything close to, like, the good that you might see that they're living, or like the happiness that you think they're enjoying. But you know, you need to like go through the first three fruits and have eaten them, for the fourth fruit to be relevant, I think, to some degree at least.
Brother Suhail, you can go ahead.
Yeah, you know, what Yusuf was saying, and then, you know, Abdurrahman was saying that, kind of sort of um, spoke to me. Like, I mean, personally, I agree with him, with Abdurrahman, that while you may not know what anyone else is going through or feeling or thinking, or you know, what things they have to live with, it is difficult for, I mean, you know, I'm sure for others here, everyone here, but speaking for myself, um, it does feel a bit isolating, when you know the prophetic message, and that it's difficult to communicate with individuals, other individuals who don't share that same worldview. Because as he says, I mean, I agree with him 100%. It does feel many times for myself like the intellect is beating me over the head, because there's a discrepancy, a discordance between what I believe and how I see things, and maybe how I'm acting or how I'm communicating with the rest of the world. And it doesn't necessarily make sense. I don't, maybe you can call it hypocrisy. I don't know what you would call it, or some sort of dualism. But to me, on a personal level, I think this is important what Norsi is saying, because in a sense, he's pointing out, I think maybe this is kind of what belief should be, or this is how you know you're on the path of belief, or on that path, straight path, is when it comes to the point, or that you see a discrepancy, as Abdurrahman was pointing out. I'm not saying one is perfect, or one actually doesn't, ignore those beatings over the head, because one can, anybody can. But if you're aware of it, it becomes more and more difficult to ignore. And the only solution are, as he pointed out in the fruit prior, I think, was about prophetic practices, because that's not a discrepancy. That's the only thing that makes sense. And to me, that's, as you pointed out, that's quite practical. It's the most practical thing there is, are the prophetic practices, in that they bridge the gap between oneself and the creator of the universe, or they connect man and the universe back to their source of existence. Anything other than that, I think, and you're going to have your head smashed in. But that's kind of the way I see things, and that may be a bit black and white, but I think if I look at myself, my own life experiences, that's kind of borne out to be the truth. Yeah, you can have a good time, laugh or enjoy yourself, as Abdurrahman was pointing out. But at the end of the day, if you are certain of that prophetic worldview, you can't deny it.
Thank you all for speaking out and voicing your thoughts. Is there anyone else who would like to say anything? There's a few people I recognize that we haven't heard from yet today. If you have any comments or questions, just feel free to raise your hand to do so. Yeah, Brother Yusuf, please go ahead.
Sorry, so I'm talking too much today. But I know a few people can talk, actually, that they didn't talk. So this, I don't know if this text has anything to do with that, but it reminds me of, he is saying he's talking about moral values as if they are enlightening humans' path in life. And when he talks about such moral values, he started the text talking about worldly people, the people of dissipation, he said, dissipated people, and even the unbelievers. And now, at the end of the text, he brought the topic to people finding some sort of guidance by belief in Jesus or Moses. Initially, he was not talking about Christians or Jews, but he ended up saying either a little bit of a faith or a connection with those messengers, or there was another case which he says, lights of a sort may remain. He said this without referring to the messengers to the end of the second paragraph, or they suppose they remain, he says. So it might be a real sort of a light or some supposition that such a light is existing there, which says it might be some sort of a faith or belief in Moses and Jesus. So how is that? Like, there's this general famous questioning towards, let's say, atheism. Like, can morality exist without belief in God, sort of a thing? And I don't know if it is a place to start such a discussion, because I know some names in the list which would like to, I guess, which can enrich us with their opinion about this matter. But the author in here is as if saying, some people, unbelievers, whatever, could present some sort of a light to their own lives, meaning find some meaning in living the life, either without, regardless of any messengers apparently, or with their connection to Jesus or Moses. But this would not be the case if you achieved enlightenment, meaning purpose of life, meaning of life, through Prophet Muhammad, والسلام, then this would not be possible for you, because rejecting whatever you heard or whatever came to you from Prophet Muhammad, if you are going to reject it, then there's not going to be anything left for you anyways. So this is sort of the, I guess, problem in here. So without or by rejecting or forgetting the message that comes from the messenger, is it that there is no sort of a meaning I can find in this universe? I guess this is, I might be repeating the same thing, but still, I guess this is how it happens when you speak, when you're thinking. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Brother Yusuf. Your comments are always, always welcome. Brother Birkan, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for beautiful comments so far. So one, I guess the approach we could take with the text is trying to understand what the author means with the word Muslim, and how being Muslim is related to the prophet, and a specific prophet, a specific message of a specific prophet, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the way I see, the author here is not talking about generic belief matters, like whether the universe is created by a creator or not, whether I should worship to this creator or not, because he already discussed and studied all these so far. He even came to the point that the worship is your natural state. Worship is what you should do all the time. So without repeating all these discussions we had so far, so what it means to be Muslim, at least the way I see, is submission. It's not just knowing that there's a creator, but submitting to the path of message and messenger who teaches you about the creator. right? This is the word, even the dictionary meaning of Muslim, the one who submits. And submit to what? Like people all around the world are submitted to something. In his example of his time, the Europeans who are submitted to another message, or even atheists, they are submitted to some other worldview. A Muslim is submitted to the belief, or came to the conclusion that the universe is created and being created by an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-hearing creator. So there is no such thing as this part of the universe is created and governed by creator, and another part is governed by or created by someone else. It is not like as well that the creators created me at some time point and then I'm sustaining myself. It is not like the creator creates things, from time to time intervene, make some miracles, send some prophets, but then wait or sleeps. As Ayat al-Kursi would say, like he does not sleep, right? Because why there is such thing in Quran? Because that's a possibility of belief. Some people are submitted to such a belief that the creator creates things or created things at some point, or still creates some unexisting things. But then we don't need creator to sustain things. The natural laws, whatever, all these things sustain themselves. Creators sometimes interfere with our worldly life, but that's it. But Quran suggests a completely different worldview. It says, no, your creator governs everything, sustain everything. You don't have anything which is not in his hands. This is the message our Prophet brought us. And this is what being a Muslim is. Believing this, seeing its truth, and submitting it. So you cannot have, for instance, being a Muslim, I cannot have a life in which I say, okay, I'm a Muslim, I'm a religious person when I go to mosque, when it comes to, the finance, dealing with some financial laws like the riba, when it comes to pork, when it comes to alcohol. I'm a Muslim. I do not, have an interest, like I do not accept interest from my wealth. I don't eat pork, but I work hard and be successful. It is me. So you cannot have such a worldview. You cannot believe, you cannot accept such a thing. Because you know that your success is being created by him, his choice, and nothing alone. So you cannot have a worldview as a Muslim in which the state, whatever it means, is separated from a church, whatever it means. So there is no such separations in your life. Every step you take is about your knowing about your creator. And since so, you also say that, okay, I submit the path of prophet because he alone, my creator alone, can tell me what is the right way to do things. Since every step of my life is about knowing him, I should utilize every step of my life, every action in my life to know him. And how I do that? By following the Prophet. So as a Muslim, I'm repeating the same thing again, I'm really sorry, but just to highlight, as a Muslim, I cannot have some part of my life which is not about knowing the creator of the universe or creator of me. There is no such part in my life. Everything is about knowing him. And again, how I do that? By following Prophet. Even with my thoughts, even with my ideas, I say, I do not create them. I know as much as I am given. I can think as much as I am given. So a Muslim, for instance, cannot say that, yes, the Prophet knew a lot, but today, I'm another human being. I can also study things. I can also learn about things. I may define another, path for myself. Every person defines his own path, her own path. So I will also define my path. This is not part of being a Muslim. So what it means then, expelling Prophet from your heart, is just saying that I don't need a prophet to tell me how to worship. I don't need a prophet to tell me how to behave, how to act. I don't need a prophet to define a path to my Lord, to my Creator. I, as a person, as a citizen, with equal rights with the Prophet, can define my own path. This is what it means, expelling Prophet from your heart. An author says it doesn't work. Like both believing in such a creator and saying that I will define my own path, it doesn't work. You cannot do that. You cannot, even if you try, they wouldn't go together. They wouldn't go along. So one has to be destroyed. One has to be abandoned. And he says, you know what? If you take this path, you will abandon your belief in Creator. Because there won't be any possibility for you to define your own path otherwise. So this is what I understand when it comes to the Europeans or whatever. It's the words are from his own time. For an American, for instance, the European wouldn't mean much thing, because in America you already have the movement of unbelief existent here. But in his time, the Europe or European ideology represented either unbelief or having a worldly life which is not governed by the Creator. So in his time, the ideology that Europe represented was the ideology that state and church is separated. Meaning, you can become a believer, you can be a believer, you can believe your religion, but it's your, personal thing. When you live your practical life, forget about the religion. You have financial rules, you have education rules, you have state rules. You should follow them. This separation, author says, wouldn't work with a Muslim. A creator who creates everything constantly and continuously doesn't go together with the idea of I will create my path, I will define my path. It wouldn't work. So you will abandon your belief in creator, such a creator, and then you will start worshipping idols. This is what I understand from the text.
Thank you, Brother Birkan. Nazmo, would you like to say anything? Your mic is open. Or no? Let me just. Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think this fourth fruit has opened up a lot more for me. And I'm, we have about 5 minutes left, but I wanted to hear your final comments on at least the last paragraph of this fruit, where, it says, if you say, I am not a European and I want to be an animal, and he replies, well, you can't be an animal because you have intellect. You have the ability to think and reflect over these issues, and so you can't ignore them. What is the desire to wanting to be an animal? Like, I'm trying to understand what the purpose of this paragraph is. Is to be an animal just to not have to, blissful ignorance, and just not have to think about where I'm going to, how I'm going to live my life according to what I'm going to have it be governed. Brother Birkan, you can go ahead.
Just very quickly related to what your question about what it means, what desire to be animal. Just open any textbook and you will see what it means to be an animal. That this is the human as defined in textbooks, that we are animals. And whatever we have as faculties, they don't differ any sense from the animals, only in quantity, but not quality. Animals fear of things to survive, and you fear of things to survive. Sometimes you use it for entertainment as well, but that's it. But not being the animal in contradistinction, sorry, is having a fear which is qualitatively different than animals. A fear which takes you surrenderance to your creator, which teaches you about your creator. This is what being human means. And just the opposite, that everyone willing to follow nowadays is being an animal. And people actually say this, loudly, proudly, oh yeah, we are humans, which are like social animals. We are intellectual animals. We are whatever, animals with high computation power, which comes with some cost as well, but we will, optimize it in future, whatever. But people proud to be animal, and we want to be animals because we are wasting our faculties all the time, non-stop, and we want to suit our wounds of conscience, because we are wasting our faculties. We're just trying to convince ourselves that no, like we are not wasting anything. This is the way they should be used. Look at the monkeys, look at the macaques. They fear for that reason, and you are fearing the same reason. There's nothing wrong with that. So continue having your pleasure. So there's an intense desire of being an animal. There's this intense, pleasure that people think they would gain by being an animal, silencing their conscience.
Thank you. Brother Yusuf, let's listen to you as a final comment, inshallah.
As usual, I'm going to go back. So I guess I'll just pose something to think about. So in general, maybe another way to read this fourth fruit would be, because we were discussing this matter in the morning with someone, with a friend. So in terms of joys, yes, like feeling like an animal, but trying to imitate worldly people or unbelievers. Another aspect for that is, I guess, falling into this inferiority complex uh, in front of the Western civilization, with like East and West in the sense of like East generally symbolizing heart and religion, West symbolizing intellect that is detached from revelation. So having this inclination, or with the filling up with the admiration to the Western civilization, and saying, am I really going to follow like a shepherd from 14 centuries ago, from just the middle of Arabian desert? Like, doesn't feel good if you are like at a living in a society, especially if you are trying to get a degree in a good Ivy League university, let's say. So it sounds like, and well, as a male, I am not carrying a flag on top of my head, but I can feel it would become a even bigger challenge for sisters who are carrying this flag on top of their head. Because as we are having such conversations with my wife nowadays, I am starting to feel that challenge more strongly. So uh, what sort of a thing that gives me, or even like in my work environment, if I do my prayer in the workplace, people are looking at me like, you sounded like you were a smart guy when we were discussing like some research problem in the meeting. Now we are quitting the meeting and you are going and just jumping up and down because someone said you should jump and down 14 centuries ago. I mean, what sort of a thing is that? Can you not, as Brother Birkan was saying, come up with a model that is explaining the purpose of this existence? Look at all those philosophers that have done it so far. Can I not now, as someone who heard the purpose of this existence from the messenger, is it possible for me to go and say that, well, actually, I didn't need what messenger has provided me. I could have come up with it, or I can come up with something better. And generally, in again, what would make me to do such a thing or take such a path? To me, it feels like it might be my inferiority complex of, well, Westerners are the ones that are going to the Mars, not the Muslims, quote unquote Muslims. So it looks like their analytical thinking is much better than ours. So then I'm having this inclination. I might have this inclination. So I guess at the end of the day, am I or can I find an explanation for my purpose of life by turning my back to the prophet and prophetic teaching? Is it possible for me? And I have a reason to do such a thing. Just I would like to underline this part. It is because I'm living in the society, I am under attack, and my ego is getting hurt. And now I would like to come up with an alternative, just like my smart and successful Westerner friends are doing. So, but how am I going to do that? And just as an anecdote, some people who might be having some background from, let's say, some smaller groups in their lives, like me. So let's say belonging to a certain group, which you might consider to be not questioning, simply imitating, whatever. Now, associating myself with that imagery might be hurting. So, what do I need to do? One alternative, be an animal and ignore everything. Or if you would like to be a consistent human being, you need to come up with a model which is explaining the worldview, and then you need to build it up and say that, look, I'm not that old person anymore because I admonished that whatever was about this backwards, quote unquote, backwards way of living or way of thinking. So if I want to have respect to myself, then I need to come up with an explanation. So am I going to be able to bring such an explanation? And I think author in here is saying that you cannot bring any explanation to the purpose of this life other than what was brought to you by the messenger. If you pay attention, if you haven't seen it before, maybe it was you being oblivious to what messenger brought to you. But whatever you can find is in the best example already in the messenger. So for whatever reason, if you would like to turn your back to the messenger, then there's nothing going to be left anyways, because his message is so comprehensively explaining the purpose of this existence for some reasons. And I guess this is why he is saying you want to don't be deceived by this other world, like you are looking at the other side of the fence. This is why he's using this imagery. You see the fence greener on the other, what's it, grass greener on the other side of the fence. This greed makes you turn your back to what is given to you. So I am having some sort of a feeling, I guess this feeling part is important, that I need to question. What is it that makes me feel uncomfortable to follow the messenger? Because nowadays, even the machine learning models, you give just 2-3 words and it completes the paragraph. If you start, Yusuf went to, it starts with to a mosque and he was shot and killed, or it says Yusuf, I mean, anything about terrorism, anything about violence. So if being under this pressure, I might be willing to, and seeing on the other side of the fence, I am seeing that those people are chilling. So if I turn my back to prophet and prophetic teaching, nothing is going to be left for me. So I think this is practically a problem, a big problem actually. And to name it, and this was the topic that we have been discussing, and the brother that we were discussing said maybe we shouldn't name it, but I will. So this belief in God is, yeah, it's okay, we should believe in God, but we don't need religion, because religion is evil, or institutionalization of things are evil. So there shouldn't be religion, there shouldn't be prophet, there shouldn't be human authority over me. It's between me and the one on the heavens, like me and God. So we are fine. Seeking for such a model is, I guess this is becoming more prominent, and it is offering a seemingly less stressful life than being a staunch unbeliever, denying the creator, because it's uncomfortable. You say, yeah, there is a God, but it's between me and him. There's no third party is involved in between. So this is something, I guess, that is being brewed nowadays. Maybe at the time of Nursi, it was more about naturalism, but nowadays spiritualist currents are all over the place. This unbelief is being sugar coated. So it's not really feeling like you are denying God, but denying messenger, and the message in this sense is so strongly out there. And I guess this fourth fruit at this point is speaking to me also from that angle. Sorry for this last moments long, whatever. Sorry about that. Jazakallah khair.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Jazakumullah khair, everyone. Thank you for participating in this discussion with us. Alhamdulillah, it was very helpful for me. Inshallah, it was for you. Whether you talked, listened, or just joined us. Thank you, and I will give the mic to Abdurrahman so he can make the closing dua, inshallah.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين الفاتحة